So that's my perspective.
Well, thank you for that, and I do want to kind of highlight a conversation that the Reverend and I were having right before we started, which is that it is complex and it is confusing. We're not going to be able to answer all the questions today, but while the majority of Muslims around the world are not Arabs, and by the way, Arabs are diverse of themselves, what's been interesting is that new data has come out that has shown that the majority of Muslims in the United States are Arab. Mm-hmm. And one of the reasons why is because of the dysfunctionality that's going on in parts of the Middle East and the influx of immigrants that have been coming over from those different parts. And so I think that can be also shaping how some people are perceiving what is Muslim in the country. And now I want to turn over to Aisha and ask, before we go into questions, what do we do about all this? So you work day in and day out. I know you're also on one of the mayor's commissions that deals with this topic and this issue, and you've dedicated your life to countering Islamophobia. Yes. So what is your advice, what is your suggestion, what is your vision for how we work as a community and here in Nashville to counter this?
Okay. I say we start exactly with what we're doing here today, coming together with open minds to learn about each other and to understand each other. Particularly for people of faith, I think it's important, and not to exclude anyone out. When you think of Muslims and Christians, they account for most of the world's population. So it's really important that these two groups work together in a sincere way to kind of find some peace and have open dialogue and have interfaith dialogue. And sometimes people don't want to come to the table because they may think that they have to compromise their faith. Mm-hmm. But to me, interfaith dialogue is not giving up on your faith. It is just coming together with an understanding to work on the commonalities. And as Muslims, in our holy book, the Quran, we are told that to tell the Christians to come to a word common between us and between you, that we will worship none save God. So we have a long history of interfaith cooperation during Prophet Muhammad's time, peace be upon him. So when we have this Islamophobia out there that is telling people that Muslims want to oppress you and that we can never live peacefully, this actually goes counter to history. This goes counter to the facts that you Muslims and Jews and Christians, there's always, or has always been, a safe haven and a cooperation of living over 1,000 years ago. So this is all new, and it plays to the part of, I want to add, of why this Islamophobia is so prevalent. Whether it is true fear that people have, or a misunderstanding or ignorance, it's also an industry that people use, and politicians use this right now. We have a presidential hopeful on the cusp of possibly becoming the president, and he has vanquished all other traditional candidates with just fear and hate. The people are voting on him not based on any of their traditional values that they say. So you have to look at what is really at stake here. And then also, I want to add, people how the intersection of Islamophobia and racism works. You may have people say, well, we're not racist if we talk about Muslims. Well, in a traditional sense, racism, Islamophobia would not fall into the traditional definition of racism. But by all means, it is a form of racism. And by that, I will explain that it's a form of cultural racism. And racism at its roots is to say one is inferior and one is inferior. So if you're saying that this belief system and these practitioners are inferior, then that is a form of racism. And to add on to that, when you are ignorant about Islam and you think that the practitioners are of a certain phenotype, where they are brown bodies and black bodies, and you use that to then discriminate and hate or hurt them, you are without a doubt practicing racism, as evident by the case of the Sikhs and the Hindus being attacked, evident by the case of what you said of the Christian Arab that for years had to deal with his neighbor harassing him. To no avail, he said, I am a Christian. But his brown Arab body embodied the practitioner of Islam. So in actuality, his race became a proxy for religion. So this is a real thing that is happening. So the only way we can combat that is to stand up to what is right. You know, our faith tells us to enjoin what is right and forbid what is wrong, even if it be against your own self. And I love that, even if it be against your own self. So, you know, it's unfortunate that our society is divided and we have just this middle ground that will either sway which way we go forward. It is refreshing to know that all of this rhetoric has brought about people saying, we will not tolerate this. We're going to push back against this. So hopefully we can be successful in the long run, but the only way we can overcome anything is by taking a step and being courageous and to stand up and say that this is wrong.
Thank you for that. Well, we've got 10 minutes to open it up for some questions. So, yes.
So I know that as an individual, I can't change the mindset of an entire country. And so as an individual and as groups of people who do care about this issue, what's the best way to integrate ourselves and to communicate that the Muslim community does belong? You know, like he was saying that you may be wearing hijabs, but I see that and I love you because of it. You know, what is the best way to integrate ourselves into that and to communicate that, like, I'm gonna cry, that that's okay and that I see the differences, but I also see the similarities and that we love you even because of that. Does that make sense?
Yes, and so just to repeat the question, because I've been asked to. Really the question is, and I won't do it justice, but is, so for someone who cannot, just as an individual, impact the entire response of an entire country and an entire nation, what can you do as an individual to make Muslims feel that they belong and feel loved? So
you do what you can do. And it's just like the Quran speaks about a life, the value of a life, individual. You have, just like life comes from physical individuals. You can plant seeds in other people to begin to multiply and maximize that, and then to reach somebody else and they begin to spread. There are probably many here, if we all go back and begin to talk about our experience and we all begin to multiply and maximize the resolve that we all have, and then we begin to see change. You know, you say one person can make a difference.
Yes.
You know, you do what you can do. That's how you start.
Yes.
Also, do you see your sister crying over there?
Yeah.
I can't speak for women in the hijab or women whose bodies are targets simply because of their religion. But I had an honor to wear a headscarf and walk in solidarity with my Muslim sisters during the Christian season of Advent. And now I have a new faith community, right? Which doesn't obliterate my faith, but I've been welcomed into the Ummah, which is the broader Muslim community. And the fact of the matter is, you see human dignity, and that's not in our narrative. Our American narrative is an individualist narrative. It's not the narrative that Imam spoke about earlier, the narrative that sees us as one, of one soul, of one essence. I can tell you a country that has been through apartheid. The South African, the African subcontinent notion of Ubuntu, which is I am because we are and we are because I am. That mutuality without which none of us exist. Not just because of Adam and Eve, right? But because we have to keep affirming that humanity and that, like what you just did, I felt very uncomfortable because you put your sleeves up, never be afraid to cry, and show how much you love people, because that's what changes the world. People like you, young people like you. I used to always tell my students, never let anyone, looking at all the millennials I see around here, look down upon you because of your youth. Never let anyone look down on you. Never let anyone tell you that millennials aren't on the front lines. Because they are.
I also want to say that you answered your own, you answered your own question when you started crying.
Yes.
Because having been around this kind of work for 40 years, the truth is a lot of what brings us in this room together is our common pain. And we're terrible in America at dealing with that, because it kind of goes back, if I use my hobby horse, if I've got to kill my compassion off towards other people in order to maintain a certain social order, we can't afford to have you cry, because then your humanity comes out, and that's the last thing we can have happen. That is completely subversive, man. You keep that up and you're going to change the world, because you're going to acknowledge that what we're doing to each other is painful. And this is not some game we're playing with a video console. We're talking about people's lives here. And we're not just talking about American lives, we're talking about a foreign policy that grows out of this whole conversation too, that inflicts pain around the world. So at least white people need to sit down and cry an awful lot over the history that we have to live with of what, my family farm has the signs of Native Americans being there and African Americans being there as slaves. And I love that place, but it makes me cry every time I'm there, because it's like, this is everybody's land, and I don't know what to do with this. This is the dilemma of white Americans, if you want to have any compassion towards white Americans, is we're stuck with a story we can't explain. So we have to keep denying it, and we have to keep choking back our tears. So I agree, don't ever let anybody look down on you because you can still recognize your pain and the pain of other people, because trust me, I have cried a bucket of load of tears repeatedly over the stuff that I've seen happen to my friends.
Can I just add a caveat?
Yes, and I want to applaud you for your sincerity. That's the starting point, having empathy instead of apathy. And you definitely have that. And when you think of in terms of, this Islamophobia or any type of, injustice going on, just think of it as standing up to a bully, because that's really what it is. So when you see that student sitting by him or herself in the lunchroom, you go over there and be the one to sit. You make the invitation, or you're the cool kid. You invite them out to your home, or you go and visit them. Likewise, go to a mosque. If you have a Muslim neighbor or a coworker, have a conversation. I trust you. Trust me, no question is a stupid question, really. So it really starts there. I remember clearly when I read the autobiography of Malcolm X in 1991. One of the things, and they portrayed this in the movie, there was a Caucasian person that came up to him, believed in his mission, and said, "What can I do to help?" And he turned her away because he did not think that a Caucasian could solve the problems of the African American. But he was wrong, because traditionally, from the pulpits, you have had Jews and Christians and people that were not oppressed to stand up with those that are oppressed. And their presence made a difference, and it actually gave a validity to what was going on. So don't think that what you're doing is too small. And like she said, the age, Martin Luther King was in his 20s, and he was a revolutionary. Gandhi, the same thing. So keep going.
And I think it's important also to point out as well that there are people being oppressed in Muslim majority countries as well. And we're doing our part, and we're working on making sure that people that are minorities in those countries as well are beginning to feel welcome. So this is something that's going on not just here in America, but it's actually going on all over the world. And we need to be having more of these types of conversations. And it's something that's, and this is what, you wanted to add something to that. It is mixed in with nations' histories. And there's different reasons as to why it exists. But a lot of times the solution's very similar. You wanted to add something?
Oh, I just wanted to say to what Robert had said, the lament has to be national, not just specifically geographically
Right.
relegated to the South. And I just wanted to say that as someone who grew up in the Southwest, not the South, because y'all wouldn't claim Oklahoma. However, we talk about it too. But however, I want to say there has to be in these conversations, not pointing the finger at one region. This is a national.
Yes.
I mean, I can show you a video of
So
someone in
it's global.
Philadelphia who's
It's
racist.
international.
And everywhere I've gone in the
It's a
world,
human
they have their own
dilemma.
version of racism.
Yeah.
And so it's not, and they deny it, Brazil, whatever. They deny it, right? I love Brazil. But like, let's not deny the racism and the other
And the effects of it.
xenophobia. We see this in Europe. Like, it's not, this is not epiphenomenal to this country. Pay attention to the news. This is going on everywhere.
Yes.
But I just wanted to say, as someone who is not from the South, it's easy historically to make the South the scapegoat. It's about all of our hearts and the lack of human dignity that should be.
We have one more question, then we're going to have to close.
Just
Yes.
out of curiosity, how can you identify and reconcile your own racism?
My own personal racism.
Yes.
How to identify it and root it out? Well, I'm a person of faith who prays a lot. And what I'll talk about today, so don't skip after lunch, is that we need eyes to see. The Apostle Paul in the book of Ephesians prays for the church at Ephesus that God would enlighten the eyes of their heart. And so I pray for the eyes to see injustice, not just in the world, but in myself, because it begins with me, right? I also happen to embody multiple oppressed identities. And so part of being an oppressed person is I know suffering. I know the way of suffering. And I identify more with theodicy, developing meaning out of suffering. What does it look like to do that? It means I cannot turn around and be the oppressor. I also can't just lament as a victim. I have to do stuff. I have to get up every day and say there's injustice in the world, right? And some days I'm like, I'm sick and tired of being sick and tired. And that's weeks sometimes, and that's months sometimes. But the reason I'm a political scientist, which is pretty damn depressing, like what I do is I get up and I have to know. I have to know where it lives. And so I have to know when it